I'm Boston 2%, author of Fire and Ice, the Meth Bible, and I'm chatting with Staxx.
Welcome to this episode of Chatting with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Boston 2%.
How's it going, Bill? How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you for taking the time to come on my show. I appreciate it.
No, I'm honored, man. It's gonna be a wild ride as always. So
definitely, you got some wild stories. I've seen you on a bunch of different podcasts telling your stories. I was like, wow, this guy's got something pretty crazy that you been through what you've been through and you came out on the other side. A lot of people don't make it.
Yeah, and pretty crazy, no pun intended. I did state hospital time in a mental institution for the criminally insane. I mean, it just goes on and on. But man, it's a bird's eye view. It's an experience like no other, man. It's a wild one.
So where did it begin for you? Where did your life start?
Well, I grew up in a town called Reading, Massachusetts. Really, the story all begins back then under an icy covered bridge, okay? I always start this story off the same way. I was born on January 31st, 1982. The devil tried to kill me that day, and I've been fighting for my life ever since. And I grew up in an alcoholic home. There was a dark mental illness present in that home, too. A lot of childhood trauma, things like that. And we were under this icy covered bridge with a stolen half a joint. And I was probably, I think, about 13 years old, and flip went the big. And it was the idea where getting out of myself was the answer to all of my problems, right? Typical teenage story. We were a band of ragtag wannabe comedians, kids from broken homes, the box of misfit toys, right? And we all gravitated towards each other, and we started smoking weed every day and hanging out. And immediately I could see that I was an addict in every single kind of way, right? But the summer going into 9th grade from 8th grade, I was in Reading, Massachusetts with one of my best buddies. We were under this beautiful canopy of oak trees in the woods. And we had one of those half gallons of like Underwood and Pierce, like $10 bottles of vodka, the big ones. Yeah, they were $10 back then anyway. And we mixed it with some orange juice. And I remember, and this story, there's a story based on this in the Meth Bible. I remember when we mixed it, and I took that first swig of alcohol is where the whole thing really changed. I remember hitting it in my stomach, and I remember thinking a thought out loud in my head. And I was like, that's what I'm fucking talking about. That I want to feel like this the rest of my life. Like all my childhood trauma drained like water in a bathtub. You think you're more interesting, you're funnier, and it was just like real romanticized. And I was an everyday vodka drinker after that day at 14 years old, full-blown alcoholic. So, I mean, I'm just starting my high school career, Bill. And already, I mean, I'm totally out of control. And I mean, what are you for? You're 14 years old. You're like a baby, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm a very extreme person. Like the Meth Bible is like a 716-page book, right? So when I do something, I do it big, whether it's good or bad, right? So, I mean, I went from that at 14. Those style pills like Adderall and Ritalin, all of that at 14. Klonopin. I mean, it was just like off to the races, pedal to the floor the whole way, right? I was a baseball player, everything. All of that stuff was out the window, and it's like childhood trauma is really the gateway into addiction. It's like that's where the devil really opens up those wounds and uses them to get and weave into your life, right? I'll fast forward a little bit, right? Like, so I started like feeling the consequences of addiction. I started losing stuff, pretty much dropped out of high school. I have like a 6th grade education. I never really went to high school. I was there, but I left at like 16. I was working at a gas station, but I had a brief period, I was a fat kid, and I had a brief period where I was like, okay, I'm going to change my life, and I'm going to start training and everything. And this story will be funny later on, but I got it in my head. I had this new dream of being an undercover narcotics officer for the Boston Police Department. Right. We were in a suburb like 10 minutes north of Boston. So I start training. I'm going to the gym. Like I'm doing like 3 hours a day in the gym and running and everything like that. Got in great shape. I went and took the ASVAB test, that pre-military test, right? And by chance, I qualified as military police. I was going to go in the National Guard. They were going to ship me out to Delaware. I was ready to go. But at the very last minute, I decided, you know what? I'm not going to go to the military at all. I'm going to move out to Vegas and become a stand-up comedian instead, right?
How old are you at this time?
I'm like 19 years old. The year was 2001. So this is August of 2001. So the military stuff was like June, July. I was leading up to it, right? And then in August, I decided, okay, I'm going to go out to Vegas. And I had some friends out there who owned a business, their older brother and all that. So I took a bus 3,000 miles across the country. I had $50 in my pocket and a bus ticket. Back then, it was like, there was no security. I had like a cooler with like a 6-pack of beer. I'm like a young kid, traveling the country. So I get out there. And then 2 weeks after I'm there, the event in September of that year happened. We all know what happened in September of 2001. So the towers, all of that happens. And, I fully believe that God used that. I believe it was like the Holy Spirit nudged me not to go into the military because he had a different part of hell for me to go into. Okay. A lot of those people didn't make it back. I don't know what would have happened, but I just feel like God saved my life with that event, right? I picked up drugs. The first time I did ever was in Las Vegas during that time period. And that was back when it was like that crystal clear window pane. You take like 2 hits and you'd be up for a week on that stuff.
You didn't know about that when you were back in Mass, did you?
No, they didn't. See, back then, it wasn't even on the East Coast. Never heard of it before. And I was like smoking out there. I was on one bad. Never took the stage, not once. I was full on back in addiction, completely out of control. Okay. So I ended up moving back home about a year into that. I moved back home. I moved in with my dad. I was like a driver for his company. I would drive them dudes around to the bars at night and everything like that. But I was a really bad alcoholic. Okay. It was like the depths of despair, falling downstairs. I mean, drinking, a case of beer at a time or a half a bottle of vodka, and I was waking up with bruises. I was a mess. Now I'm like 21 years old. Right. So I turned 21 years old on a Friday night, and I ended up in my first drug and alcohol treatment center on Monday morning, one of 9. And I went to the East Coast, some of their best. I was in like McLean Hospital. Like, I think James Taylor wrote Fire and Rain or something in there. I don't know. But I started going through that mill, and I'm just getting exposed to people that are doing harder drugs, shooting up, things like that, right? We end up moving to Corpus Christi, Texas. My dad he got divorced and his career was wrapping up there. We moved to this city called Corpus Christi, Texas. They call it the Sparkling City by the Sea. The name of that city quite literally means in Spanish, the body of Christ. Okay. It's very interesting. Like the whole story of the Meth Bible unfolds in a city after Christ's namesake, right? I mean, this is a story about the devil. It's a story about redemption. And it's told through the eyes of a meth-addicted cab driver, okay? It's a very unique experience. It was a wild ride, and we'll get into that. But now I pick up a bad habit. The drinking continues for a few years, just flashing through all of that. I ended up like at 25, I met a girl. I was in a brief period of sobriety. I'm exposed now because of the treatment to all the 12-step programs. So they planted a seed, like that's where you go when you're really in trouble, right? I know I'm talking real fast. It's a long story. So if you want to jump in, just let me know, okay?
Yeah.
All right. But I get exposed to these programs and I'm like, okay, this is the first time like I'm even hearing about God. Never heard about God in my house growing up, but we were Catholic, but my dad drank a lot. He was a womanizer and like he'd high five you if you were cheating on your wife, type of deal,
Yeah.
So it was like we were best friends. We were like drinking buddies more than anything, right? So I'm living with him. I have this brief period of sobriety. I meet a girl. She's got a little girl. And I'm like, what do you do at 25 years old? You get married, right? You get married. That's what you do. You start a family. So I was masquerading as a normal person just long enough to where I could take my first set of hostages, you know? So I'm in this marriage. We start having children. I end up working in this career. I get this career. I've been a salesman since I was 14 years old. I get this career leasing like $1 million beach homes out on the beach in Port Aransas, Texas. It's a little island, North Padre Island, where they do spring break and all that stuff. So I start having like a successful business career, right? I'm doing millions of dollars in sales. I relapsed right out, like, I think it was like 2 days before the wedding. So I'm drinking full on again. No drugs, but I was drinking every single day. I ballooned up to like 382 pounds. I was completely out of control. Okay. And when you're making that much money for people, they tend not to bring up your bad behaviors. You know what I mean?
What about your wife? What was she saying about the whole situation?
Oh, she hated it, you know, and she's a good woman, you know, she's a good mom. She didn't drink like me. She didn't never do drugs, none of that stuff. So it was like me. They're living with a complete alcoholic, a madman at this point. But I go to work every day. I show up, I go to work, I make the money. She was a stay-at-home mom for a while. We ended up working together and everything. But then it all starts to come unraveled, right? Like after a decade of being in an alcoholic marriage, after all the trauma, after all the fighting, everything starts going really bad. I got beat in I jumped companies like 3 times. In the last one, I got beat in a bad business deal. It's a small town. I boxed myself in. So nobody's going to mess with me at this point. So in a matter of a couple weeks, I lose the career. I lose the wife and kids. They're gone. And I end up moving back with my dad back in the city of Corpus Christi, which was about 35 minutes away. Now, the sound of the absence of my children's feet on the floor and them opening the door for me when I walked through the door after work, it drove me insane, right? So I don't have God in my life. I lost my career, and I'm not a dad and a husband. I have no identity. So I get a job as a cab driver. Now, if you just rewind a little bit, right before I lost my career, I started dabbling in this guy I was working with. So I would stay up, you know, and I'm now like a full-blown sex and pornography addict. I'm living with my dad. I get this job and I work like 7 p.m. till 7 a.m. and I'm driving a taxi. Now I've got this little chip of a problem, right? And everybody starts off snorting for the most part. Everybody snorts. You know, it's fun. It's a very sexual drug. That's how the devil gets his hooks into you. And if was just losing your teeth and losing your kids right off the bat, nobody would do it.